interesting to think about the fact that right now there are people who are actively trying to hack into your corporate network and steal whatever information that they can. Let's talk about some of the key challenges that your customers are facing. Malware, ransomware, and spyware on the endpoints. If I'm a hacker and you are a remote worker and I can get you to click on something that downloads a piece of malware to your machine, then I've got a really legitimate shot at getting into your corporate network. Protection against malicious websites and dangerous URLs. Sometimes it's not just that you went to a suspicious website. Sometimes you were actually on a legitimate website like Forbes.com, for example, or any one of a number of other examples where there is something called malvertising. It's malware advertising. You're on a legitimate website, you see an ad, you click on the ad, and the ad happens to take you to a site where malware gets downloaded to your machine. Then you've got this issue of compromised credentials. If I am able to access your banking information with just a password, you may want to consider banking somewhere else. Passwords by themselves may not be sufficient. And so we're going to talk about compromised credentials and how those create vulnerabilities. And then unsecured connections into the corporate network. Recommendations are that there be the use of the VPNs and that those VPNs be secure. Now, to address these issues, we've got the Cisco Secure Remote Worker program. For the malware and the ransomware and the spyware, Cisco AMP for endpoints. Protect, detect, and respond to advanced threats. We're going to show you how AMP works in a moment. For those malicious websites and dangerous URLs, Cisco Umbrella. The beauty of Cisco Umbrella is that it makes use of how the internet actually works, of how IP networking works, and it's able to prevent attacks before they even happen. Compromised credentials, Cisco DUO, multi-factor authentication, and as an added bonus, you're able to go ahead and ensure that the devices that are connecting into your network, that those devices themselves have the proper operating system and current patches. And then for those unsecured connections, Cisco AnyConnect Secure Mobility Client. Okay. Now, one of the questions that service providers will sometimes ask me is, well, all of that stuff sounds great, but how does Cisco Secure Remote Worker program, how does that help me as a service provider increase revenue? We're going to come back to that in a second, but first let me make sure that we're clear about what these products are and what they do. Okay. So Cisco AMP for endpoints. This is my protection against ransomware, malware, and spyware. Here's how Cisco AMP for endpoints works. The remote workers, they are an expanded attack surface. They're looking for assistance. Cisco AMP for endpoints, which is cloud-based, you install a small software client on the laptop or the desktop. And then anytime that remote worker accesses a file from the internet, that means anytime it is copied, accessed, or downloaded, Cisco AMP for endpoints will then go ahead and send that file up to something called the AMP cloud. The AMP cloud is a database that is a repository of information, file reputation information about every known piece of malware that's out there. Cisco AMP for endpoints makes use of Cisco Talos. Cisco Talos is the world's largest private threat hunting organization. They interface with FBI, NSA, everybody in the United States. They interface with the Ukrainian security organizations, with other companies, with every major security organization on the planet. With Cisco Talos, you can block 100% of known malware That's right, 100% of known malware and over 99.9% of brand new malware. Now, how can they do that? Here's what's actually happening. Okay, if it's a known piece of malware that's out there, which is what the bulk of it is, Cisco Talos is going to have that information, and that information is going to be in the AMP cloud. So anytime that file gets copied, accessed, or downloaded, Cisco Talos is going to go ahead and identify it. The file gets sent up to the AMP cloud. AMP cloud comes back with reputation information. Known good, known bad, unknown, or give it a score from 0 to 100. So it's not necessarily known good, it's not necessarily a known bad, but it's been given a score. Now, how does that score come about? Let's assume it is an unknown piece of software. We don't know it. It's never been seen before. It's what's called a zero-day attack. You can go ahead and send it to AMP Cloud. If AMP Cloud comes back as unknown, it can then be sent over to something called Threat Grid. Threat Grid is a sandbox. It's a place to go ahead and actually detonate the file and check it. They run hundreds of behavioral indicators, and they cross-reference all of the information they see with previously known malware, with previous information. Now, let's assume that we do all of that and it looks like it's okay. So the file gets allowed in. I'm in California. I have downloaded the file to my laptop. Suddenly then that file begins behaving suspiciously. Suddenly it begins trying to contact my finance server. AMP is going to go ahead and register that because AMP continues to track the file when it's on my network. Or let's say that the file is on my network and it doesn't do anything, but suddenly somebody in Saudi Arabia downloads the file and new information about that particular file becomes available. Well, Cisco AMP is going to go ahead and gather that information and then block it on my network. It takes antivirus to it goes far beyond just simple antivirus. Antivirus just checks to see, hey, is this a known piece of malware? Cisco AMP for Endpoints is able to go ahead and retrospectively analyze the file, track it continually, and help with zero-day attacks. That's Cisco AMP for Endpoints. Now, let's assume that you don't have AMP for Endpoints on your machine. Let's talk about URL filtering. Now, in order to talk about URL filtering, we got to talk about DNS, domain name service. Let's talk about what happens when you open up a browser and you click on Amazon.com. Now, most of you know this, but I like to go ahead and go through it anyway, in case anybody's unfamiliar with it. You click on Amazon.com. What happens when you do that is that your browser will then go ahead and it will look to the DNS server, that is the domain name server. It will go ahead and find what is the corresponding IP address for Amazon.com. It'll then go ahead and construct a packet and then send that packet out to the Internet. Well, here's what Cisco Umbrella does. Cisco Umbrella will preemptively block requests that are dangerous. Cisco Umbrella, pulling in information from Cisco Talos and information from literally billions of DNS requests every day. Correlates all that information, and then what happens is if I click on a website and it is dangerous, Cisco Umbrella, which now is operating as my DNS, blocks it, doesn't allow it to happen. Or let's talk about ransomware for a second. Here's how ransomware works. I download a file to my desktop. I don't have Cisco AMP for Endpoints. It gets downloaded. It's on my particular desktop machine. Now, the way that ransomware works is once it's downloaded to the machine, it then does a call out to a command and control server somewhere out on the Internet. And then from that command and control server, they'll download the encryption keys. Cisco Umbrella blocks that. It won't allow the call out, and it'll also register that call out. So that's why we say with Cisco Umbrella, we're able to go ahead and block attacks before they ever even happen. And the beauty of Umbrella, literally all you do is just simply change your DNS server to the DNS server for Cisco Umbrella, and it's up and running. Compromised credentials. 99% of security breaches are a result of known vulnerabilities. Some of you may remember WannaCry from a few years back. The WannaCry virus was a result, it was ransomware. It was a result of a Microsoft Windows vulnerability. Microsoft had issued the patch, but not everybody patches on a regular basis. So that was a result of a known vulnerability. 81% of security breaches as a result of stolen passwords. So you had stolen passwords, and then 70% originate at the endpoint. Cisco DUO is able to go ahead and help with that because what we do is we have multi-factor authentication. You're not allowed onto the network until we verify you are who you say you are. This is particularly useful when you think about the fact that now remote workers, we're accessing data that's at headquarters, we're accessing data that's on the public cloud, we're accessing data that's on the private cloud. And what Cisco DUO is also going to do is it's going to ensure that that device that you are connecting into my network with, that device itself is compliant in terms of operating system, in terms of patches on that particular device. And then for remote connectivity, Cisco AnyConnect Secure Mobility Client. We're able to identify who and which devices are on the network. We're able to automate checking those particular endpoints and support for IP phones, or excuse me, for iPhones and for iPads and other devices. And then it also is going to give those administrators the ability to monitor exactly what's going on, who is coming onto the network and which apps are they using. What service providers have been doing is that they've been taking the Cisco Secure Remote Worker products, bundling those with business class bandwidth, and then offering that to their customers as advanced network protection. Or, in some other cases, what they will do is they'll purchase licenses in bulk from Skyline, for example, and then they will make those offerings to their customers. By the way, for those of you who are interested in purchasing licenses in bulk, that's primarily going to be with Cisco AMP and Cisco Umbrella. Purchasing the DUO licenses is a little bit trickier. What they're doing is that they recognize that network security is a concern, so they're using the conversation about network security to engage with their customers to help evaluate and educate them. Whether or not you want to resell the licenses, that's fine, but you can still go ahead and make sure that your customers are aware about Umbrella and AMP and DUO and Cisco AnyConnect Mobility Client. Or they're simply just working with their customers' IT teams in the area of network security.